You are listening to Latinx America, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade.
Stephanie, it's such a pleasure to have you here at Latinx America. You're one of the speakers at the Latinx and Tech event hosted by the Cape War Center. So I'm really excited that you're taking the time to join our podcast and share your story. So why don't we start by learning a little bit about your professional journey and your personal journey into tech?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. It's been an incredible event, and I'm feeling very blessed to be here with everybody who is really pushing the ball forward. I am actually from Southern Arizona. I was born just along the border wall. For those of you that may not know, there is already a wall. Mm-hmm. It's had many faces over my lifespan. I didn't quite grow my career along the border wall, but with some circumstances, I ended up coming back home. What you can imagine in the place where I come from is one city divided by two countries. The city is named Nogales, but we consider Nogales not as two separate Nogaleses, one being in Arizona and the other being in the northern state of Mexico, Sonora, but we call it ambos, which means two. So Nogales is one, even though it's divided by two countries. It's a really interesting dynamic, if you can imagine. I, like a lot of talent in the community, was encouraged to get out because of a lot of different factors, all primarily based off of the lack of opportunity for talent there. So talent flight, brain drain. I really never had considered coming back home for any reason, but got this opportunity after having been involved in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I grew the majority of my career, to come back home and lead a group of University of Arizona students to do a feasibility study along the border wall to see if it would be viable for us to, or actually an organization that considered me for it. They were looking to launch an innovation space there. Mm-hmm. So they were thinking of accelerator, incubator, co-working, hybrid of sorts. Mm-hmm. So we ran a study to see if that would be viable. The results were life-changing for me because it changed my perspective of the community that I had come from, and it flipped the perspective, more importantly, that there was nothing in Nogales. I began to realize that there was so much opportunity, but by that time I had honestly, I was viewing the world through a completely different lens because I had already tapped into the innovation space. In Tucson, Arizona, I was involved with primarily economic development. And as the world was changing and they were, the Tucson community was developing an innovation district, I accidentally, or maybe, it's fate, I landed into that space and began to work with building up a startup community in Tucson while working alongside the private and public sector in revitalizing the downtown area. My main work has always been with youth. Originally with Tucson Young Professionals, where I was doing community development and economic development and trying to really mend the talent gap in the community. So a lot of those things combined, including with me being a founder for one of the co-working spaces in Tucson, the original ones, I began to take these knowings and this expertise and this new lens into my community and played around for the idea of kind of coming back home, for a couple of years. Launching events here and there, tours, just kind of like testing the waters to see what me going back home would really look like. But ultimately, what happened was that I really felt a sense of responsibility to be at home. There are so many sensitivities right now that exist along the wall. We are all hyper aware of the rhetoric, coming from our administration, and our world is moving into requiring a lot more technological solutions. And more than anything, I began to realize that if we do not live in the new economy and we're not innovating or empowering, the individuals that otherwise may not utilize technology or think in that way, Nogales had a potentially folding or struggling. And I didn't want that to happen. So I went back home.
And back home, you've been focusing on this community as well. When you say you went back home, where were you?
In Tucson.
Oh,
Yeah.
you were in Tucson, and then you moved from Tucson
To Nogales.
Nogales, okay.
Yeah.
To border town.
So I've been in Nogales for 2.5 years. I began doing a lot of research on the Arizona side, but ultimately ended up on the Sonora side. And while I began to explore Sonora, I realized that there was already a developing, kind of emerging innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem that was building there, and began to just really build this natural tie of opportunities that existed across borders. Like, let's have this conversation as one, because like as I mentioned, this community is one community divided by a wall, but they're vastly different. Even though you have to wean yourself out of Mexico, like it really does take up until about Tubac, Arizona, until you start feeling like you're even in the States, because it just, it's just one community there, a really interesting dynamic. But
so you're seeing tech and innovation in this startup community as a way to revitalize and to move Nogales forward. I mean, that you have a vision for this.
Absolutely. I knew that I wanted to do something certainly in the space of innovation and entrepreneurship, and my natural inclination was that we were going to build some type of innovation space hybrid. And then I began to think of innovation spaces as a network and how we might be able to establish them along the Arizona-Sonora region so that we could really drive the need that was necessary across both of the states. But then I got invited to participate in this really incredible program on the Sonora side, where the government there, the Secretario of Economía, Universidad de Sonora, this grassroots organization called Sonora Lab, they partnered up with Harvard University from Massachusetts. And they came into Sonora and offered an international certification in sustainability, in innovation and sustainability. And out of that program is how we launched Startup Unidos. So the idea behind it was that they were moving in as many influencers from across the state to come together and really think about strengthening the innovation ecosystem in the state of Sonora. There are some serious changes that are happening in the world, and our state's economy on both sides of the border are dependent on the sustainability of those, particularly the supply chain, to work in order for us to feed the world, to provide energy, and so many other things, aerospace, transportation, I mean, you name it. Those are key sectors across the region. So we all came together, and our role was to either create a startup or develop a community. So I developed a community for startups, right? So I'm a startup for startups, Startup Unidos, helping primarily universities, governments, corporations, and business associations really tap into empowering women and youth on both sides of the border to start up new companies. So these are all pre-seed, early stage, companies from people who otherwise may have not gotten the opportunity. So this conference that we're at right now is really appropriate because Latinos aren't really considering themselves enough as entrepreneurs. When you say the word entrepreneur, somebody might think of Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. They may not think about, the local entrepreneur who is also making a difference in the community. And for a state like Arizona, it's really interesting because the majority of entrepreneurs, small business owners who are really driving economy through our state are Latinos, but they're not technological businesses. And we need a technological revolution in order to truly be able to innovate and offer the real solutions for the challenges that we see along the border wall. And it's really interesting the dynamic that we have across Arizona and Sonora, and the sense that we have of what a wall exists compared to the rest of the world. Like, most people legitimately don't even realize that a wall is already there. Yeah. The rhetoric is harsh and it's strong, and I'm doing everything possible in the space that I work in to not only flip the perspective of what the impact that the border has, but really try and drive just a completely new opportunities through empowering women and youth, but then also to allow people to begin to share a different understanding of what that life might look like and how dependent we really are on our relationship with Mexico.
So you're changing the narrative and at the same time improving, relations between
For sure.
both sides, right? As you think about innovation and some of the startups that you're working with, do any of them come to mind that you think, oh wow, this total untapped talent could make such a big difference, not just for the local community, but for the rest of the country?
Absolutely. Nogales and the gateway through Nogales is the gateway of fresh produce, of fruits and vegetables. And it goes through Nogales, and we feed about 70% of all fruits and vegetables come from Mexico through Nogales. A very small percentage of that, less than 0.5%, which equals about 200 tons of produce, is thrown into the Rio Rico, Arizona landfill every year. It's a horrible, horrible problem, but there are other problems along, just the system, the entire supply chain of getting fruits and vegetables into our community. The majority of food waste doesn't even begin there. There is, if you can imagine the way that it's been described to me, it kind of moves out like an hourglass effect. So these 200 tons are only the beginning of food waste that's moving from one country into the next. Right now, we're working on developing a partnership with the University of Arizona. It's looking very successful, so that we can begin to incorporate the youth of the community, not only in changing the narrative and them recognizing the real opportunities that do exist across borders and particularly in their own community, but we're allowing them to come up with creative solutions to this problem and develop businesses out of them. Businesses that we could keep in our community. There are Generation Z, millennials and Generation Z, they're a completely different breed of human, and they're different on each side of the border. The magic really happens when we're able to bring both of those worlds together, because the changes that we're looking to make impact both sides and really create, positive change with those collisions that we're creating. There are also, really interesting programs that are coming out of like high school kids in Hermosillo. There is a group out of a startup weekend that we did out there that, interestingly enough, took a very traditional drink, which is, the Jamaica, the hibiscus, sweetened hibiscus product, and made a chorizo out of the extract, out of the hibiscus leaves, created a chorizo. So there is a far larger market on the United States for alternative meat products, or, moving away from that, not so much in Mexico. That's not necessarily a culture that's really picked up in Mexico. But it's a pretty genius model to where you could make the Jamaica and bottle it and sell it. And then, from the extract that would otherwise maybe go into a landfill, they can produce a vegetarian, or in this case, vegan chorizo. If you taste it, you really can't tell the difference, So, yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that are coming out of young people that are moving into the world, understanding it from a completely different lens than we do. And I just feel really grateful to be around young people, because they're truly the ones that are going to shepherd it, right? And women are also equally important in being empowered, because women are more likely to move into the space and save money to move their children into higher ed. So we're really looking to support women and youth for that reason, because we are dependent on them for the real changes that our world is looking. Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you have faced, whether it is, building the community that you've been able to build, or in general, and what strategies or steps have you taken to overcome them?
Well, it's required a lot of patience, because at the end of the day, I'm an American. I've never had an opportunity to be able to live in Mexico, and although I had the fortune of being raised by my Sonoran grandparents and certainly being exposed to Mexican culture, all of my studying has been in the States, particularly like my career development has been very hyper-focused in the States. So assimilating myself into Mexican business culture, I think, has certainly been an interesting challenge. Yeah, I would say that it's a challenge, but it's not a challenge that doesn't have a solution. There is a lot that still isn't happening in Mexico. There are certainly different practices to go about things, but I also see that as a really great opportunity because they're looking to learn, and the better that we can develop the systems there is a better pipeline of Latinos that we can move into the States. The culture also in the United States isn't really adaptive to the percentage of Latinos that are moving into the space. Like the prominently white communities that I see in our country here in the US welcome Latinos, but that space may not always be appropriate. And that challenge, the way that we're looking to resolve that is by being able to offer entrepreneurial services and programs in the United States for Latinos, beginning with Arizona and of course, because that's where we're focused, but really be able to offer programming that is conducive to the experiences that they have so they can be more relatable and can actually move into the system, having had, those more dynamic experiences that really serve them based off of, the perspectives that they bring into the programming.
What role do you think technology will play or will continue to play in terms of innovation in your city?
It's inevitable. So we just had this Latinx in Tech, had the amazing opportunity to be able to host it in Tucson. There's a lot of misconceptions still when it comes to technology. You put something out there and they're like, is it only Latino? Is it only for technologists? Well, I'm only a user. I'm not a creator of technology. Mm-hmm. But really, technology is going to play a part in absolutely everything that we do. As we're moving into a world of, we're moving into the Internet of Things, and the world is changing. We have to begin and continue really our work in introducing technology and empowering these youth and women to really move into anything that they create with a technological spin on it. We've developed really great relationships with the capital cities on both sides of the border, which hold the prominent talent in that space. And we're bringing them into the more rural communities so that they could get that cross-border knowledge exchange. And we've had several conversations on developing academies, STEM-focused academies for youth and women that will move on both sides of the border so that we can continue to change the narrative, develop new business ideas, but those ideas that show the highest potential of truly becoming solutions, products. We want to be able to nurture them and foster them far beyond just the idea stage, but it's something that we will move into. But amazing partnerships like working with Caper Center and Techstars is certainly allowing us to to plant really a field of seeds out there to make something like that possible.
And right now with technology, you can work from anywhere. Arizona is a relatively affordable place to live still, right?
Absolutely.
So if somebody wanted to launch something or join your efforts, how do they get in contact with you? Or
yeah, we are pretty active on all of our social media platforms. So I invite you to check us out, to really take a look at some of the albums and the programs that we've offered in our community by visiting us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. I tweet a lot of really great information for those of you that are interested in that. I really want to hear from you, so you can reach out to me by emailing me at startupunidos@gmail.com. My personal handle is Steph Berm, and you can also follow me across all of the different platforms. I want to hear what your needs are, and how you want to get involved. I'm looking for mentors. I'm looking for instructors. I'm looking for collaborators of every sort. I am not in this to recreate the wheel in any sense. The more I flip stones, the more I realize that there are already great working models out there that have been proven, and I don't want to have to do it alone, and I certainly don't want to recreate the wheel. So I invite people who are interested in this space, who want to support us in the work that we're doing, to come forward and have a conversation with us and see what's possible. For those people that are looking, who might be in the area, who might be listening, that want to be a part of our program, also reach out and let us know if there is something there that we may not be able to offer immediately because we're still continuing to grow. We are very well connected across the region and know that we can place you into a program that is good for you at any stage that you might be. You don't need to know technology. You don't need to have a fully fleshed out idea. Like any barrier that you might have, if you're there and you have an idea and it's burning and you're coming up with an excuse, tell me what that is and I will help you overcome, the obstacles that you face to actually make it possible for you, because we need people at the table.
Thank you, Stephanie. Let's go back to your personal journey. Who has had the most influence on you, either professionally or personally, and why?
I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of influencers in my life. There are people who have always been able to step up and mentor me. I surround myself with really great people, not only just in the professional aspect of it, but also on the spiritual side. There is far more to entrepreneurship than reading books or going to a university or having mentors. When you are an entrepreneur, you're essentially committed to getting onto a roller coaster and ugly crying every now and then, right, along the way. It's not an easy road. It's very difficult, and it takes a lot of really just kind of working on the deep stuff, right, in order to be able to get through so many of the challenges, because you're constantly being pushed out of the box, right? Sometimes multiple times a day. So the people who have influenced me in my life are far spread, and I feel really fortunate for that. But when you're clear on what it is that you want to do, we tend to attract really great people into our lives. And then that ranges from professors to local people that I've met in the community that have really, really taken me under their wing and are trying to shape me and connect me to as much as is out there to make this organization possible. But that is also because I give back a lot. I give back a lot, and I'm in that same way always willing to be able to support others and give them my time and my expertise to help them carry forward. So,
thank you, Stephanie. Is there any other additional advice that you'd like to share with the people listening to us?
Yeah, I mean, the world has changed. This conversation that we're having about Latinx and technology is not something to be considered as though it's in the future. The time is now. Like we have arrived, and we have to really break away any of those barriers that are keeping us back from being able to completely embrace this model. We live in a world that's surrounded by a lot of fear, and we also need to break away that fear and really start kind of flipping that frustration that we might feel for things that we may not control, and really kind of like tap into our passions that are moving us forward in our gut and doing something about it. Like what I do in this world may not look like what you do in this world, but you have to do something.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your story. And we look forward to hearing all the great things you'll continue to do in terms of border relations, but also just building the next generation of startups that will not only impact your beloved state of Arizona and your city of Nogales, but also the rest of the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Latinx America and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.